last video on chapter 1, which is called The Coming World Order. We're in the theoretical interlude, and I'm on page 29. And we're talking about who decides which city or region will become a center. We already talked about the center, the hinterland, and the milieu, and the periphery. And outside the periphery, for those that are outside the market order. And this is a market form. So the essential question that must be answered is, who decides which region or city will become a center? A city becomes a center when a constellation of industrial and political elites organize themselves around a cultural project and harness their resources to develop new technologies and faster means of communication. Because of their innovative temperament and technological inventiveness, they are better suited than any other group in the world at a certain historical moment to satisfy a perceived universal need with a new product. In general, it takes a nation that is able to react in a more imaginative way than its competitors to turn a problem into a solution. For example, Amsterdam, without enough land to grow wheat, developed the dye industry in the 17th century. The lack of adequate coal resources in England was perhaps the chief reason for the extensive use of the steam engine. So that's just explaining this right here, turning the problem of technological inventiveness into a solution to develop new technologies and faster means of communications. That's how the city becomes a center, because of the political elites organizing themselves around a cultural project. So they just move up and move to a new location and use their new technologies that they have been keeping away from the public to bring the new market form. Such events often occur at the same time as a radical change in religious thinking or in political organization. Luther and Locke are at least as important as the emergence of Amsterdam and London to the important emergence of Amsterdam and London as the technological innovations of the time. So Locke, the religious thinkers, are as important or more as the technological innovations of the time. Today, in the same way, Tokyo, unable to expand geographically, has learned to master the techniques of miniaturization. The cliché that necessity is the mother of invention is an enduring economic truth. Material abundance or geographical advantage rarely accounts for the emergence of a center. It is important to stress that neither in past market forms nor in those that will arise in the future is the center ordained to become the master of global politics. Rather, it has often been those who have known how to avoid becoming entangled in a war that bled their rivals that have become the center. So war is not peace. This lesson is one we must keep in mind as we try to evaluate America's future place in the world. So yeah, the war in the Middle East, winning the war in the Middle East is not going to be good for America. It's clear as day. The Eighth Market Forum took shape in the 1930s. Its center was New York, the de facto capital of a region whose prosperity was being driven by the technology of the electric motor, which made possible such time-saving, mass-produced consumer durables as the washing machine, the refrigerator, and the vacuum cleaner. And this convenience gave rise to feminism, which destroyed Western civilization. But anyhow, the Second World War was the midwife of this market form. The desire of families for homemaking durables was met by the Keynesian New Deal social spending policies of the early post-war period that, above all, sought to put purchasing power and home ownership into the hands of the majority of Americans. He's talking about Roosevelt's New Deal and the Keynesian economic policies and social spending policies of the early post-war period. Easy credit meant consumers could always buy new products. And remember that documentary that I posted on my Facebook called The Century of the Self. It totally talks about how Madison Avenue and Wall Street did their bid to transform American society in the last century and transform the mind and created this order of liberal socialism that he talks about in this book. So that's the documentary of BBC called Century of the Self. Let's get back to it. Madison Avenue and Wall Street did their best to create and expand the markets for products of all kinds. The market form, whose center was New York, achieved a remarkable hegemony until the mid-1960s, when it entered a crisis as the cost of producing goods and services increased drastically. Disorder erupted in the markets of the principal currencies of the center and of its surrounding hinterland. The crisis will last until a new center and new consumer goods emerge. The model of how world centers, so he's talking about that America has been in crisis since the 60s because, like he said, from the Second World War until the 60s, 2 decades, it's a short period of time, but he said that disorder is the dominant. What did he say? Disorder is the natural state of the world. So since the 60s, we are in the crisis. The model of how the world centers develop and decline helps us to understand the period of transition we are now entering, and this is in 1991. It offers particular insight into the efforts of the United States to stem its removal as the country that contains the center of the eighth market form and prevent the rise of its challengers in Europe and Japan, who seek to establish themselves as the location of the new center of a triumphant ninth market form. So that's the first chapter, Theoretical Interlude, finished. And this is the first chapter. And now we can move on to the next chapter, which is called The Struggle for Supremacy. Alright, so that's the end of the first chapter, Millennium, The Coming World Order, Theoretical Interlude, subsection. Until the next time, peace.